So good morning or good afternoon, depending on wherever you are. Alan Gould and I are the co-hosts today. My name is Rosemary Walling. We're recording, so you can find it on our YouTube channel or on our seminar archive page, and I'll put those links in the chat. Next month, Alan will be leading the Planetarium Educators Workshop. The focus on his first session will be on communication. Alan, do you want to say a sentence or two about that?
Well, it's based on an old IPS Special Report number 10, which was the Planetarium Educators Workshop Guide. So this is old but still applicable stuff, and communication never gets old.
Okay, so that'll be 4 weeks, I guess, from today. I don't have the exact date written down here, but it'll be the last Friday in July. So whether that's 4 or 5 weeks from now, it'll be the last Friday in July. And I think 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern, and 2100 UT. So we have a sign up. Please sign in where you're from with your name. There's no set end time, but we will stop on the hour and let people say goodbye if they need to leave. So the speaker today is Emily Peavy. She's the Senior Education and Engagement Assistant at the International Gemini Observatory based in Hawaii. Before that, she was at the Imaloa Planetarium. And she's going to talk today on free choice learning. So thank you, Emily.
Aloha, Rosemary, and thank you for welcoming me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen onto my slides, even if I might end up talking a little bit still afterwards. This presentation is going to be a very interactive presentation where I'm very much of the philosophy of live interactive engagement. So I will have the chat open for any questions sort of thing. I also will be able to see you guys on my screen. And if you guys have raising hands or anything, or if there's any questions that you guys would like to ask. And as Rosemary mentioned, I am the Senior Education and Engagement Assistant here at the International Gemini Observatory, which is a part of NSF's NORLab based in Hawaii. I know that's a big mouthful. One time I went to a conference and I had to put my title on like the name thing, and it said Senior Education Engagement Assistant, all this stuff sort of thing. And it was so long that a bunch of the text got jumped down to a lower thing, and then the top text just said Senior. So it just said Emily Peavy, Senior, and then there's my title. I thought that was very funny. But yeah, so today I am going to be talking about free choice learning as well as identity motivations and other things that we think about with free choice learning environments. A lot of what I'm talking about is going to be research that I came across when I was working on my master's degree and my master's in education. Research is not my own. However, I do have things that I've cited like throughout the slides, and I'm of course willing in order to share these slides if anyone wants to jot down something or look into this research any further. When I was conducting my master's research, I was comparing education and engagement quality of live programming versus pre-recorded programming. And I thought this mindset of thinking about free choice learning and also the identity motivations of people coming into free choice learning environments became very relevant in thinking about the audience experience in the planetarium. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so we'll jump on in to my next slide so I can also do a little bit of a definition of some of the things that I'm talking about. And we're going to be starting with this term that I'll be using a lot, which is free choice learning. The term free choice learning is proposed to be an alternate descriptor to informal learning or education. So we often are in communication spaces when we talk about classroom environments, it'll be described as formal learning. And then anything that is not a classroom environment gets described as informal learning. However, that kind of puts places that aren't a classroom a little bit of a short end of a stick, because you're defining that space and that education that takes place in that place more by something that it is not, instead of something that it is. You're saying that the thing that makes this special is that it is not a classroom environment. It is something that is completely separate. So instead, it's proposed in order to, instead of saying informal education or informal education environment, switch over to a term of free choice learning. And this term puts the emphasis on the fact that people that are in this space with you for learning are actively choosing to be there for one reason or another. So the learners are exercising choice and some degree of control over conditions of them being there, and also what is learned, and as we're going to explore as well, what they'll even be able to take away from it. And the argument as well is, so I'm sure you guys can all think of free choice learning environments. Common examples that are cited across this research are places like zoos, aquariums, and of course, planetariums and science centers, any place that their learning is a focus of what happens there, but the people are actively choosing on being there. And it is also really fascinating to me to consider a little bit about, like, also sometimes you will have audiences that are in free choice learning environments, but they might not be going through all of the steps of free choice learning, so sort of thing. So like a public program would be packed full of everybody who is a free choice learner in that setting. However, like a field trip, you're getting back more into formal mindsets, since not every student is actively choosing on being there. They're being brought there as a part of the school experience. But even just by kind of dissecting informal education versus a different thing of being able to define the environment and the learning taking place in that environment and what it is, we're able to see all these unique different levels of the audience experience. Now, John Falk, who's the person who does a lot of research in this, he is based out of Oregon State University. He wrote a great book on this, which I have in my office. If anybody's in Hawaii and wants to borrow this book, they're always welcome to. But now, in getting to presenting in free choice learning environments, we are also wanting to think about understanding our audience. And through this research, there's a pitch that when people are entering into these free choice learning environments, that moment that they are choosing to come into it, they are taking on an identity. And that identity is going to help guide their goals of what they want from the experience, and also what are they going to be able to take out of the experience as well. And a person's identity, it might be different for every single visit. But in that moment, there is a reason why they're thinking of being there. John Falk, in his research of surveying a lot of different people in a lot of different environments of free choice learning, have broken down these identity motivators into 5 categories, which are the explorers, the facilitators, the experience seekers, professionals/hobbyists, and the rechargers. And we'll go over each one of those. So as a reminder, once these people, typically we're thinking of adults, or at least maybe at youngest maybe teenagers, anybody who is actively choosing on coming into this space for the learning experience. The first one that we'll tackle is the explorers. Explorers are motivated by their own general curiosity and interest in the subject matter. And I think across like science centers, we might assume that just maybe everybody visiting is probably falling underneath this category. And this is a category that is capturing a lot of the visitors that are coming to these areas, but it is important to also think and recognize distinctions between this identity motivator versus other identity motivators. They do not consider themselves to be experts on the subject at all, but they do enjoy learning more about it. And they can describe themselves as curious people, science lovers, discoverers, learners. Their knowledge on it on the subject that is being presented is very, very low, but they are curious enough in order to make the choice to enter into the educational experience. Our second motivator is the facilitators. The facilitators are people who are attending the experience or in the environment, not for the benefit of their own learning experience, but for the benefit of somebody else. And I think the most common one, if you're looking across an education center, would be the kids, the parents that are accompanying their kids. So the parents are there, they're totally okay with learning something and they want to be learning something, but the main purpose of being in that space is to facilitate the learning experience of the people that are coming with them. Why they might be interested in primary of the subject matter, their primary focus is the experience of their loved one. Number one example of this that I always think of is parents. However, you can also think of partners, two people that are coming and one person is very, very, very interested and one person is there in order to accompany their spouse, their partner through the experience. Then we have the experience seekers. The experience seekers are motivated to collect the experience of visiting the space. They are going to be driven by recommendations or opinions of others, and their experience is filtered through a recreational lens. I want to come back to that in a moment. But a prime example of this that we especially see in Hawaii is tourists. So these are people who are visiting an area. They might have learned about the educational experience, about the science center, about whatever they're visiting through a guidebook. And they went, okay, maybe we should check this out as part of like a checklist of everything that I'm doing while I'm visiting the area. And they are still likely very, very motivated to learn if they are actively choosing on coming into the educational experience. One thing that I thought was really interesting, and then once I read it, I can also see it in many experiences as well that I've had with people who are in real life and people of this experience type, is that the experience is filtered through a recreational lens. So that means it's kind of like if you think of having like boxes in your head of where and when and context of you learning different experiences, this identity motivation, everything that they are learning kind of gets put into the box along with, if they're tourists on a vacation, is going to go in that vacation box. While I was in Hawaii, I did this experience and I learned these things, and that's put into the box that I think about with a vacation. But when I go back home, might not be as accessible in my mind as other experiences as well. Yeah. Then our next motivation, we're getting to the professionals and hobbyists. These are people who, possess a strong knowledge and interest in the content area. When I was first learning and reading about this motivation, I often thought of amateur astronomers, especially with science centers. So people who are hobbyists and maybe building telescopes sort of thing, or really interested. And so they are often looking for very, very specific knowledge or very, very specific aspects of the content area. They want to enhance their knowledge for their hobby or profession, or even learn how the content is presented. One of my favorite ways that I've seen a description of professional hobbyists is you can think of maybe teachers who might be about to teach this subject in class or preparing a lesson coming up, and they want to see how people in the education space, other professionals, are teaching that topic in order to then think if they want to be teaching in a similar way or if there's something that's standing out to them. So good examples are teachers or amateur astronomers. And the last identity motivator, as classified by John Falk, is the rechargers. Rechargers are motivated to recharge from the stresses of life and have a goal to reflect, rejuvenate, bask, revel, and experience of space, and look for a peaceful experience for introspection. So these are people who their primary goal might not be to actively really be learning and actively really engaging, but they find something peaceful and relaxing about being in the space of education. Being in the planetarium and flying through space helps them relax. And I know these days a lot of people have anxieties for one reason or another. And so being able to escape from some of the things in the world that are giving someone anxiety, to step into an educational space, a space that is celebrating science and learning and the universe, is something that they find very rejuvenating. In our polls, when I was doing my master's research, we polled we did a survey and polled how many people were falling into different motivations. We're using that for some other aspect of the research. Not a lot of people actively identified as this, but it is a significant amount that we do like to classify them into our different identity motivators. And then other times I've done this presentation, I've talked with people and they've thought like they could think of other identity motivations of people coming in, and that's fantastic. And it's just getting yourself into the brain space of being able to recognize that these people are actively coming into the experience and what possibly might be motivating them in coming to the experience in order to help make an engaging, lifelong learning experience for them. So now we're going to play a game with everyone. I believe in live interactive programming, and so every part of my presentation needs to be live and interactive. How this game works is I'm going to give you an answer to the question, why did you want to visit the Science Center today? So imagine you have an audience and you poll them these questions, and these are some answers for them in order to say. And it is your guys' job to then think about the different identity motivators that we learned about and think which identity motivator that answer would fall into. The explorer, wanting to learn general knowledge, but not considering themselves an expert. Facilitator, primary purpose is to be facilitating another person's experience. Experience seeker, wanting to collect an experience, wanting to learn, but also maybe in this lens of collecting that experience. Hobbyist, maybe answering a specific question, or recharger, person wanting to relax. So we have them numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll put up the answer, and you guys can either type in the chat the number that you think it goes with, or if you want to, I do see all of your screens up here. You can even hold up your fingers if you want to as well, in order to think about what's going on here. So our first one, why did you want to visit the Science Center today? My family/friends love to explore here. Which identity motivator do you think that should be? Number 1, explorer, 2, facilitator, 3, experience seeker, 4, hobbyist, or 5, recharger. All right, I'm seeing a lot of responses for 2. And get my fancy thing going. That would be classifying underneath number 2. I do see some people probably tacked on to that word explore. And as I mentioned before, many facilitators are interested in their own exploring on their own, but the primary focus of them being in there on that day is to be facilitating family and friends. So their first thought is the people that they are coming with. And like I said before, that these identity motivators, these aren't lifelong identities that you're carrying with you. This is just the identity that they're coming with on that day. So a person who is a facilitator today, when they're visiting with their family, they might come at a different time and be more underneath a different identity. I know oftentimes, like working so long in museums and science, sometimes I might visit a place and I'm part of the experience, I'm really thinking as an explorer or a facilitator, and then I'll get really into something and think like, oh, I could also present that too in my work, and then I jump into more the mindset of the hobbyist. Okay, second one, why do you want to visit the Science Center today? I want to have fun. Okay, I see a couple for 5. I see 1 for 3, another one for 3, Another one for 3. Oh, we're almost pretty well split on this one. Our research has this one as a drum roll, an experience seeker. And like I said, a lot of these motivators, they can have really similar things. The rejuvenator, the relaxing person, they might not be thinking of fun, they might be thinking more of relaxation and letting their brains relax a little bit. But fun can be a part of that. Okay, answer number 3 is I feel a sense of awe when I'm here. Okay, I see a few fingers up for number 5, and I'm seeing some 5s in the chat. And that one is number 5, a recharger of wanting to be in the experience, just to be feeling that awe, feeling that part of being with nature or being with education. Next one, I love I love learning new things about astronomy and history. Okay. Seeing a 4, and I'm seeing a lot of 1s. And that is number 1, yes. What's really separating this one from number 4, hobbyist is really thinking about wanting to learn something very, very specific. So wanting to learn new things about astronomy in general or history in general, but the hobbyist might want to be thinking about something specific. Okay. Next answer, it was suggested I visit while I was in the area. Okay, I see some fingers for 3. That's for 3. And that is, yes, number 3, that experience seeker. Person who's wanting to visit just to have a visit and have an experience. Okay. Next one, I was hoping to answer a specific question about my special interest. I see a lot of people pop up with that number 4 very quickly. Yes. Like we were just talking about, that is the hobbyist. That's a person who is really, really looking for very, very specific knowledge, maybe a specific question or just something very, like I said, specific about what is being taught. Next one, my friend/partner made me come. This one, when I was doing my master's research, we had all of these listed, and you put a dot next to the one that you identified with for it. And everybody that I gave the surveys to, they would see this one and they would show it to their partner and then laugh. But that is number 2, a facilitator. You are there because someone else made you come. Okay, got it. Our last through. I'm not an expert, but I'd like to satisfy my curiosity about these subjects. Yep. That is number 1. Key point there is the not an expert part. Okay, we'll get through the last two. I think you guys are catching on, and we only got 2 options left. I want to see how you teach a topic that I also teach. And that is, yes, our number 4. And I really do like this one of thinking of interacting with teachers sort of thing. And sometimes it might be people who are young teachers sort of thing. And it's the first time that they're teaching their subject, the first time that they're teaching astronomy. And they might want to be combating something that they might have had a misconception on, or they just learned about a subject and they're going like, wait, how do I pare this down to something that my students can understand? Well, how do other professionals do that too? Wanting to engage in the experience in that way. Okay, our last one is coming here helps me relax. Yeah, Yes, and that is number 5, RV chargers. And as we talked about before, these identities aren't super hard fixed identities. These are identities that can be in flux over time, even throughout an entire experience. But you can imagine, like, say, after you give a presentation and a person is coming up and talking to you, thinking about those different ways that that person's coming into the experience and what they want to get out of it can also ensure that you are answering their questions in a way that will help benefit their experience and what they want to get out of this experience. A hobbyist will probably ask questions that are very, very different way from an experience seeker versus an explorer versus a facilitator. And so it's great things in order to just think about as we're thinking about our audiences. So breaking away to that, we're going back into thinking about the education of the experience itself. And oh, I do not know. Oh, there we go. That's the research right there. I accidentally clicked a link. This is a great quote from John Falk, is education research supports that humans are highly motivated to learn when they are in supporting environments, engaged in meaningful activities, freed from anxiety, fear, and other negative mental states. Individuals have choices and control over their learning, and the challenges of the task will meet the person's skills and skill sets. These are essentially the 5 most important things in order to ensure that somebody is learning out of your experience. We'll talk about a few of these things in depth. The first one I'll talk about is engaged in meaningful activities. And I really want to focus in on this word of engaged. And so I'm going to actually exit out of my slides. I'll do a quick little thing here where I want to hear you guys' feedback of when you guys are giving a presentation, or sorry, when you are in a presentation as an audience member. How do you feel engaged? What are the things that you do in order to express engagement, or what are the things that when you're in an experience and you felt very engaged, what parts of the experience ensured that you felt engaged with the learning experience? Feel free to type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute and say it out to everyone, feel free to. Looking forward to what's next. I like that presenter is speaking with me, not at me. Able to follow at the right pace. I can ask questions. So there is space and room for you to ask questions. And I think this asking questions really does tie back to that presenter is speaking with me and not at me. Meaning that there is room for you that you feel comfortable being able to ask those questions and that your question is not going to be dismissed. Okay. A new way to think about something. And I think that answer is very, very much like the answer of a hobbyist too, a professional hobbyist. Of when going into the space, and maybe it's something that you turn around in your head already in your profession, but when you go into that space, you're like, oh wait, like they just said something in a unique way that made me think about this in a way that I never had before. And then material is interesting, novel, and accessible. Okay. It was the first time that I did this presentation where I didn't massively put a typo on the screen as I'm typing. I have one more slide where I'm doing this though, so I might have just jinxed myself. Anyway, so when you are an audience member sitting in your presentation, we're going to make this about planetariums because this is PPA as well. So you're sitting in that planetarium, and you feel engaged because you are looking forward to what is next. That material is interesting, novel, but also accessible. It's introducing you to new ways that you're thinking about something. You're able to follow along at the right pace. It's presenter's not zipping through a bunch of stuff or going way too slow. You feel like you can ask questions, and in you asking questions, the presenter is not talking down at you, not talking at your different in condescending ways. The speaker is presenting with you as a fellow human in order to help you, guide you onto the experience. Is there anything else that you guys would like to add of what are things that that presenter is doing in order to make you feel engaged? Using terms you can understand? Oh, I like that the speaker seems relaxed. But sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes you're running from field trip to field trip, from here, from A to B to C to D to A to B to C to D, and you have to, in each space, you have to take a breath, make sure you seem relaxed. That you're asked to do something as a part of the presentation. I'm gonna add. Okay. And meeting the audience, test students where they're at. I want to go back into like the asking them to do something. So that can be something that's physical, that's tactile. That could also be something that is take a moment and think, take a moment and reflect. I'll get into this a little bit later. One of the favorite things that I like to do, and if I'm giving like a common star tour, is I'll put up the night sky and I go, everyone take a moment and look, and now say out loud something that is standing out to you. All right. So I think this is a pretty good comprehensive list of what it means to be engaged to you when you're an audience member sitting there. Now we're going to flip a little bit. And now we want to think about, what does engagement mean to you when you are a presenter? When you are presenting to that audience, how do you know that they are engaged? How do you know that they're with you? They are hopefully enjoying the experience and learning something from the experience. Asking questions. Okay, visual and auditory feedback. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm going to answering, responding to questions, laughing at jokes. That's my favorite. I know I'm very funny. I love it when audiences verify it, though. Okay, someone wrote visual and auditory feedback. What does visual and auditory feedback look like and sound like? Because a fart can be an auditory feedback, but I don't think that actually says anything about their engagement. You can tell I've been presenting with very little kids. This jump straight to referencing farts. Gasping. Smiling, laughter. Eyes are wide open. Okay. Okay. Nodding along. Okay. Focused attention. How do you know that your audience has focused attention on you and not just spacing out while staring in your general direction? Okay, we can come back to that. So as a presenter, you are presenting to an audience, and you know that that audience is getting very engaged with you, is very interested. They're following along with what you're saying. They are responding to questions that you're saying. You're laughing at jokes. They are smiling, laughing. Their eyes are wide open. They're nodding along. They're going, wow. I will say one thing with our free choice learning environments, if you're thinking about pressures and who your audience is, who's more likely to outwardly say, wow, kids or adults? Kids are a lot more likely in order to say wow out loud. I think if you get a wow out of an adult, you definitely know that you hit them with something they're going to remember, because it's oftentimes adults. We're trained in order to not be making noise, not be making waves, not be having ourselves stand out a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And they are asking questions. I love that. I'm really interested in the fact that that was the very first thing that someone said, was asking questions, because planetarium spaces sometimes aren't the best spaces in order to make it feel like your audience is able to ask questions. Their setup tends to be very, very formal, where if there is a live presenter, the live presenter is standing in front of everyone and facing out towards them. It's a very dark space. It can be a bit of a difficult space in order to, throughout the presentation, be doing back and forth, asking and answering questions. However, after the program, if they were asking you questions, that definitely shows you that they were engaging. However, part of this question is also to be thinking of, if you're mid-presentation, what are you, if you're not seeing some of these things, that might be telling you that you're not doing something in order to gauge the audience. It is not the audience's responsibility to be engaged with you. It is your responsibility to be engaging to the audience. Okay. Is there anything else that we want to add on in thinking about that? If you're standing there as a presenter, what are things that you're really seeing in order to know that your audience looks very engaged? In the dark planetarium, hard to tell. No phones or unrelated side conversations. Oh, I like that. No unrelated side conversations. I love when I'm speaking with like teenagers, because teenagers will always get distracted in so many areas. And once again, that's getting into the environment of a teenager on a field trip isn't necessarily a free choice learner. They're there as a part of the school experience. But I love when I can be presenting and I'm walking around the dome and I sense that there's some teenagers having some side conversation. I just go up and I stand right next to them and continue presenting. I'll put eye contact as another good one. I probably have. What is the energy in the room? I like that. And sometimes there's a lot of energy that you might not be able to control when you're walking into a space. But connecting with an idea that there could be energy in here that there is some type of outward force that is contributing to that energy. How would you be tackling that, and how maybe addressing this other energy source in the room before getting into your presentation? And like I mentioned before, when we were talking about our rechargers, reacting to each other, yes. Hopefully in respectful ways. Sometimes it's really hard with public. Audiences reacting to each other in respectful ways. But sometimes people might be bringing outward energy in and then thinking about like, okay, are you bringing outward energy in and you want me to acknowledge that, or do you want to just continue on with the presentation to ensure that this is a relaxing space? All right, at that, I'm gonna go full screen again. Okay. So this was a great thought experiment of thinking about what it means to be engaging and kind of doing a little bit of introspection on your own presentations. And with all of that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about thinking about building a presentation and how your engagement is being included in that presentation. Make the audiences feel like you are one of them. I think that's part of it. Yes. So I want to get into this idea of a presentation, most like planetarium presentation, and thinking about this idea of a presentation being active versus or passive versus active versus interactive. And as I define these terms, passive is an experience that has little to no audience interaction. So, something that would be similar to watching a documentary or a movie. Imagine yourself as the audience member, you come in, maybe there's a person that greets you and says hi, you sit down, you watch the experience, and then when the experience is over, you stand up and you leave, and maybe you say bye, sort of thing. So those are experiences, like I said, in a planetarium, any playback shows I find to be very, very passive experiences. But playback shows, they often mean that you don't even have an opportunity to be interacting with something, because typically for interaction, you do need to have a live person there. But there are many people who do live shows that the experience does end up being a very passive experience, in that they're not opening up any part of the presentation in order for the audience to feel encouraged to be acting with that space. Then we have our active experience, in that audiences engage with the presentation in a very limited capacity. This can be like a close-ended question with a right or a wrong answer. So what is the planet that is most famous for having beautiful rings? That is the answer, Saturn. Is this such and such star? Yes or no? So that's a close-ended question, in that there is a correct answer. In this presentation, one thing that I did with a close-ended question was our little game of figuring out what experiences, what statements matched with different identity motivators. That is technically a close-ended question, is a bit more of an active experience. Active experiences can be still very engaging, because engaging is often thinking that you are really thinking about something. That's good. Once the correct answer is given, the presentation moves forward. And then we're getting into interactive. So interactive, the way that I define it here is that the way in which the audience members are engaging can change how the presentation is then flowing. So say an audience comes in and we're going to do a tour of the night sky. We're going to explore what we can see in the sky tonight. And we bring up the sky tonight and we ask the audience, what do you see in the sky? That is a question that there isn't a correct answer to. That is, they can see whatever they might see. They might see UFOs. And then you ask, well, what do you see that you think is a UFO? And they point it out and explain what it is. But this is giving audiences a space in order to really, really focus on something that might be interesting to them, and then also give you information as a presenter in order to branch into that topic, in order to ensure that they are getting an experience that they are actively learning something out of. So open-ended questions where presenters can assess knowledge and level and interest. Oh, yes. And I'd say comment that a movie can be active if you pause at times for short interactive part, initiating thought or discussion. So that can be very true as well. That if you're having a movie, if you're having a playback, you can either be pausing or encourage people to be thinking about questions during the presentation, and then afterwards, or pausing at midpoint in order to then have discussions, in order to be then engaging where you would think that audience interest is. Now, my advice, if I was training people up on being presenters in spaces, free choice learning spaces, is to be allowing your presentation to be flexible, adjust topics and discussion flows to the interests of your audience. And in training, so many people, when they first start in being in spaces where they're talking about this at all, they do end up building very, very passive experiences, because they are also getting into the flow of learning and being able to be interactive and engaging with the students. However, I always want to encourage people to move through these different ways in order to present, passive to active to interactive, and be adjusting that as you're going along. And in my mind, I'm always like, hey, interactive is the best. If I was an audience member and I was in a space that was interactive, that would be an experience that I would remember for longer because I felt like I could be a part of the experience. However, an important thing to consider, catch-22, if you go back to thinking about those museum identities, the identity motivators, would all of those identity motivators have the exact same goal with engagement? If you have an audience, one day, say it's a slow day and you have an audience of 5 people and they are all rechargers, they just want to relax. Are they going to be as likely to be wanting to jump up and answer questions? Probably not. They're probably okay with just being there and just partaking in the experience. Okay, so jumping back to this quote of education research supports that humans are highly motivated based off of these things. I want to get into they are in supporting environments and they are freed from anxiety, fear, and other negative mental states. And I really want to bring up the topic of low shame environments, because nothing turns off an educational experience like the introduction of shame into the environment. And with that in mind, we'll do this fun experiment. Part of me always hates coming to this. It makes me mean. Okay, I'm going to have 2 volunteers. I'm going to need to put up a question, and I'm going to ask you guys that you answer the question incorrectly. And I'm going to respond in 2 ways. And I want you guys to consider, in the ways that I respond, which way felt better to you as the person answering the question, but also as the general audience. So here we go. Do you recognize the shape of stars? What shape is it? So our first volunteer, go ahead and turn off your mic and say the answer to that question. That's incorrect. Someone put in the chat, letter J. No, that's wrong. That's incorrect. Next.
I would say the Big Dipper. It's a dipper shape.
You know what? It does really look like a dipper shape. And the dipper shape, the Big Dipper is a shape that we are often used to recognizing in the stars. That's not quite right, though. This is the constellation of Scorpius, or Maui's fishhook, that can be found in the southern sky. Okay, switch my brain back from play acting. Those 2 ways that I just responded to the incorrect answer, how did you guys feel about those? The first way versus the second way?
I don't know that saying Scorpius was actually this correct answer. The question was, what shape is it?
Okay, that's true.
So that's open-ended, and any answer is a good one.
That's a fair point.
So that first person could have argued with you about that.
They could have. If that person, though, if I was presenting to a group of people, and let's say it's 20 people that are all visiting as a part of a tour, and I did that answer, I've introduced myself in a place of power, that I am going to be presenting with you and I'm going to be sharing information to you. And somebody stood up, I asked them a question and they were brave enough in order to come up and sing and answer that question. And I went, no, that's wrong. Do you think that person, even though the way that this question was phrased, there is room for that answer, the way that they answered to be right, the way that I responded, you think that person would feel comfortable enough in order to go like, wait, no, I was actually technically correct.
No, that first answer totally turned them off.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm getting at. The way that you respond can either spark continued interest and engagement or shut them off for the rest of their presentation. That person was brave enough in order to do public speaking, which we forget in the planetarium is one of the most terrifying things to most people in the population and to planetarians as well. They were brave enough in order to stand up and say an answer, and you shut them down with the way that you responded with just going, no, you're wrong. And sorry, this is stuff I care really passionately about. I'm actually tearing up a little bit since you really nailed it on the head there, Alan. But the response of, oh, I see why you thought it was. So, I mean, Carl, I definitely agree with your point that is just a letter J. That is both sort of a thing. But in the thought of this is a question with a correct and a wrong answer, going into the, oh, I see how you think that, and I am supporting your thought process in thinking that. And that was a good thought process in thinking that. However, it's not quite correct. This is the answer that I'm looking for, sort of thing. So
another aspect, if I could just jump in, is that the assumption is that we're talking about the Western constellations, but I mean, everybody sees shapes in the stars.
That's very true. You'll notice in my answer as well, I'm like so trained. I'm like, it's not just Scorpius, it's always also Maui's fishhook. We have any other thoughts on this?
I think part of the point here is that to recognize whether or not you have asked an open-ended or a closed question, because open-ended questions there generally is not one correct answer.
That is true. Okay. I like that feedback. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick. And let's try this experiment with something else. Let me bring something up here. So now I'm going to bring my screen up and I'm going to have a picture on my screen and similar experiment. I'm going to share this screen. And the question is, for our group, what are we looking at? And somebody tell me the wrong answer. I'll do the same thing again.
Cotton candy.
No, that's wrong.
That is a chicken.
I think I can see a chicken in that. That's very, very, very perceptive. However, while this does kind of look like a chicken, you can definitely see the feathering of how it can look like a chicken. This is actually much bigger than a chicken, Ron. I know you have a bunch of chickens in your backyard, but this is so much bigger than those chickens. Those chickens also are, this is a type of nebula. This is the Rosette Nebula, and this is really, really far out in outer space. And if I go back to my play acting, Diana, I feel so bad that I keep being mean to you.
You're good. I did it on purpose.
Whenever I give this presentation, this is the hardest part of it because it is actually actively very hard for me in order to give the first responses at this point because I hate
Here's a good first response. You idiot, can't you read Rosette Nebula right there on the screen?
Oh, that'd be terrible. Oh my God.
And then the 5-year-old looks at you, I can't read yet.
Oh, yeah. And that's why you never want to be mean. One thing I do want to point out, though, in the second response, this was also a fun experiment for me, and I did take advantage in that I know Ron, and I know he has chickens, and Ron loves chickens, sort of thing, but also in him saying the wrong thing and in me actively trying to see where he got that answer from, sort of thing, it allowed me to connect with him on more of a personal level. in some of our earlier presentations, somebody mentioned that one of the ways that you feel engaged is when the audience and the presenter is feeling like a person to you, and you're acting like a person to your audience members. So being able to connect on that personal level, it also is helping with the engagement of it. So there you go. So that's I was taking the same thought process on something that's a little bit more concrete, less of an open response. One of the reasons why I do this one, I did this one in the presentation, maybe I'll change it for my future ones, is because I did actively see somebody do that specifically for this. When I used to work at Iniloa, there's this beautiful mosaic that incorporates the shape of Maui's fishhook into it. And I once saw a volunteer ask a group, it was cruise ship passengers, big group of like 30, 40 people, asked this group, do you recognize this shape on the floor? And someone shouted out Big Dipper, because that was like the one constellation that they knew. And he went, no. And I saw it happen. I saw the light wash out of that person's eyes. I also felt the environment of the entire group change, because they saw one person who was brave enough in order to speak up immediately get shut down, and now everyone else was afraid in order to speak up. Okay, I know we're coming up on our hour and people are needing to sneak away. A lot of my final notes, I think, are things that are people that most of us are probably pretty aware of. This presentation I first made as a training presentation for new presenters. But I'll just read through them really fast and we can discuss them as we like. So thinking about as you're creating your presentation, an audience member might only retain a few pieces of information. Make everything you say be worthwhile. And what are your goals? What do you want the audience to take away? And make sure that those are things that are being emphasized. The way that you present information will make it more or less likely to be remembered. So thinking about when you were an audience member, what was things that made it engaging? I was like, oh, there's jokes, there's laughing sort of thing. If you're able to make something into something that people are actively engaging with, this is the line that they're giggling at. This is the line that they're gasping at. And being able to build your presentation around moments like that in order to be emphasizing the power of those moments. Ensure that that's the information around those moments that is going to be remembered later on. Be mindful of what you're assuming of your audience, and consider phrasing and how it frames information. Be aware of who or what you might be making the butt of a joke. I was at a LIPS presentation a couple years ago, and there's a great presenter who was very, very engaging. And at a certain part of the presentation, he said something like, I know no one here likes to do math. And afterwards I spoke with him, I'm like, you just made everyone in there who does actually enjoy math, and math is their favorite subject, feel left out, feel othered. So thinking about what you are making the butt of the joke as you're controlling that space in that environment. And then dealing with difficult questions. I know it's often when somebody comes up to you and they really confidently say something that is completely wrong and might even be full misinformation. A big challenge I'm still even learning sometimes is how to combat that misinformation while still maintaining the shame-free environment and the supporting environment. So somebody comes up like, oh yeah, your presentation was really, really great, but I don't know why you didn't talk about how the earth is flat. I honestly don't have a solution to that one personally. It's very, very much situation based, but if you dismiss their worldview, they are less likely to be learning something from you. And so how do you support their curiosity and education while guiding them to things that are correct? And this can also be very dangerous in very interactive spaces, that if you're building your presentation around interaction, you don't want misinformation that somebody else is bringing up to accidentally spread. Oh yeah, combating misinformation, not shutting down conversation, positive, open-minded. an audience member more information and tools in subject area misconceptions and encourage them. Oftentimes in astronomy, oftentimes in planetariums, we're thinking about astronomy. And remember that astronomy is an observation-based science. And everybody is able to observe and able to interpret things from their observations. So if there is somebody that has misinformation, maybe guide them towards observations that will then help them to find things to what you are actually presenting about. Okay, I have 3 minutes past the hour, so I'll leave up my citations. And once again, I'll be happy in order to share these slides with the citation links that you can be jumping into. And at that, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to thank you. I certainly have questions, so I'm going to hang around. Anybody who needs to leave can say goodbye at this point. And let's give Emily a round of applause if you want to unmute. Okay, so we can continue as long as there's discussion that people want to have. And so I'll wait and let somebody else jump into the questions first. Oh, and if you did not sign in, we do appreciate if you do sign in. It lets us know who was here with your name and where you're from. These are the places where you could find the recording.
I'll put my email in the chat in case anyone wants to email me.
And if you're willing, Emily, we can also post your slides with the recording on the website. Yeah, so people can get the citations. I'll jump in quickly and maybe people after me, but it just strikes me so hard with the 5 categories of the possibility of one presentation working for everyone. Mm-hmm. Especially 4 and 5 seem kind of at opposite ends, whereas maybe 1, 2, and 3 kind of work together a little bit. I was wondering what you might say about judging what, you know, if you're in a museum or a public planetarium and it's kind of open season, how do you judge the audience when they come in?
So I will say you will not know how your audience members are leaning in on these identities until you have sustained interaction with them. Sometimes greeting will give you hints of one way or another sort of thing. I think learning about these and keeping in the back of your head helps you kind of to guess at what they might be. But it is going to be very difficult. So sometimes for professionals and hobbyists, they're all signing up for whatever experience that you have advertised. So if we're thinking about a museum experience. And so a professional or a hobbyist, if you have multiple presentations that are happening, they're probably guiding them to the ones that are sounding like they're going to be more scientifically intense. So they might be naturally choosing to just go to those ones, while a facilitator, a parent might be going towards the kid presentation, etc. One thing I'll say about rechargers from my sensing are very, very chill. They want to get into the space in order to stop thinking about something that is causing them stress. And therefore, they're kind of happy just being there, and whatever you can do they're probably happy with, as long as they can be somewhat relaxed. So maybe don't spring your testing for your new Halloween show where there's people screaming at them, but overall it's going to be probably pretty easy in order to meet the needs for chargers. I do think that you can design a perfect experience that is going to be helping every single one of them, but part of the whole nature of what I'm encouraging as well is to be to also be thinking about how you can be adjusting your presentation. If you're getting responses, if you're having an interactive presentation, and you're really getting a sense that a good portion of this audience is thinking about this stuff at a higher level, then you can be adjusting that level up. Or if you feel like you're really losing people, then you can be adjusting the level down and presenting at a lower level.
I have a question
Yes.
or comment or about the motivation game.
Mhm.
I I had it, when you first started it, I guessed wrong on the first two ones. And so I'm in that category of I could have been turned off by your response in that what was the correct one. But you did, I think I think what you said that there was it possibly could categorize, or that the categorizations were loose, that there can be shades of gray or things where they don't quite fit into one. And I think that's an important thing to if that is the case when you ask a question, that it's not. I mean, I got the sense that these were correct answers because you were putting in the correct answers there, and they did line up that way, and I think it was a good learning experience to learn how to categorize these different types of people.
Yeah, I will say, I think at the end of the day, this is a bit more of a soft science than a hard science because these identity motivators, they're not an identity that you carry with you your entire life. They are identities for why you're coming into any experience. And that could be the 2-hour experience that you're at a center, or even the 2-minute experience in which you are having a very specific interaction. One thing I'll say about these specific phrases. These specific phrases I came across when I was looking into studying these and incorporating them in a very, very academic sense. So I was preparing my master's research and I was preparing a survey, and I reached out to John Falk about like, hey, I really like this research. If I am surveying people and I want to have a way in order to get a sense of what identity motivator they're falling into as they're coming into the experience, what are ways that I can do that? And this is what that came up with. And I think that's probably the reason why these questions, because we're trying to get them into that academic slot, into that academic hole, why they do, also in the way that they're presented here, tend to feel a lot harder than in the actual ways that you're interacting with people. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Oh, yeah, similar
I'm
thought,
sure a lot
Alan.
of
What
these changed during the presentation too.
Sorry, say that again, Andrew.
I just had a similar thought with that. The first one, also it's the way how you interpret the questions, because I interpret that question as my friends and family that to explore here, as if like a word of mouth referral, than rather than I'm accompanying my friends or family. Like
Exactly.
yeah. So it's kind of a different way of
You
interpreting
might
the
have
question.
people that even throughout their experience, it is changing a little bit the way that they're going. And one thing that was in the book that I mentioned, a specific example of you can have people that when they're entering, they are facilitators there with their families, but then they might find a way to break away, go like, hey, honey, can you watch the kids for like 10 minutes while I go check out something on my own? And in that place, they're breaking away from the facilitator and doing an explorer, maybe even a hobbyist kind of mindset.
I forgot to mention that if somebody gives what you think is a wrong answer, a good way to approach that is, well, what made you think that?
Mhm.
I mean, or how did you come, you know, why did you say that answer?
Exactly, yeah.
Rather than saying it's right or wrong.
And one thing that I've often found, and I was doing this, I was trying to demonstrate this a little bit as we are playing that game of answering correctly. And one thing I found is if you ask people directly, sometimes they're going to feel very put on the spot. If you ask them very directly, why did you think that? That's very close to saying, no, you're wrong. And so that can start, it's not as bad as know you're wrong sort of thing, but it can make them feel put on the spot and feeling a little bit under a microscope. So when I was demonstrating a little bit, and everybody can approach this in different ways. This is just the way that I approach it, is when I hear the wrong answer, I think about why they might think that. Why do I think that Ron thought that the picture of the Rosette Nebula looked like a chicken? Because, oh, maybe if I look at this, oh, I can also maybe kind of see a chicken. Or a common one where it's, would you recognize the shape of stars? And someone says the Big Dipper. Well, the Big Dipper is probably the one shape of stars that most people know. So in my response, I go, oh, I state, this is kind of why I think you're seeing this. Or like, oh, it does look like this. Oh, it does seem like this, sort of thing. And what you're saying of asking them in order to explain their thought process can sometimes work, but it also can go in the other direction where they feel a little bit of shame.
Actually, I think it really depends on how you say it, and what I said was not the way to say it. I've heard, I think the best presenters I've heard say something like, "Can you tell me more about that?"
Oh yeah, that's a great way to go about it too. I'll also say audience size and audience relation makes a difference, sort of thing. If it's 30 cruise ship passengers who met each other this morning, I wouldn't want to call out somebody to talk more than they feel comfortable with. If it's 5 members of a family, then encouraging them to like share their thought process they might feel more open for it.
And of course, if it's an open-ended question, you can always ask, are there other answers from like elicit answers from other people,
Oh yeah.
what they
One
think.
of my favorite things to do for open-ended questions, like I said, is I turn on the sky and I ask, what do you see? And well, I'll have people go, I see something that's not there, that see something that is commonly known but is not actually in the sky right now. Oh, I see the Pleiades. Well, this is the middle of summer. We're not seeing the Pleiades. And so, but prior to that, I introduced directions of the dome. And I guess, okay, where are you seeing it? All right, can you say what direction is it in? Is it high or low? So I can figure out what you're seeing, and then I can point it out. So. I see a couple of people unmuted. I'm not sure if you guys wanted to jump in with a comment or not.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is there anybody else who wants to jump in with a question or comment for Emily? Well, again, I want to really thank you, Emily. I learned a lot. And I have an interactive show that I need to prepare for Sunday. So this is great for kids. So it's a little bit different, but actually the how to handle answers to questions is one thing I really needed to review today.
Excellent.
So thank you again. And we'll go ahead and stop the recording, I think.